Good day, grade 12 learners. Welcome to today's Life Sciences lesson. My name is Vedika Maraj, and this lesson is brought to you by the Gauteng Department of Education in collaboration with Sabono Discovery Center. You can WhatsApp us on 063-508-1301. Please remember that you must only send WhatsApp messages and not any voice notes or pictures, and we will see how we can best assist you. Right, so today's life sciences lesson is going to be on human evolution. Let's first start with the examination guideline. As always, we explain to you the importance of the examination guideline. Please remember that this is your scope of the paper that you're going to be writing. Human evolution is part of paper 2, and you will be finding this topic there. When you are looking at this, we are first going to be looking at phylogenetic trees, and then we're going to look at the characteristics that humans share with African apes, and then we're going to look at the anatomical differences between African apes and humans, and we are going to be focusing on these bullets. So when you are learning and when you're going to have your textbook open or your workbook open, you must make sure that you know the anatomical differences between African apes and humans with these bullets that are given over here. Right, so where's our place in the animal kingdom? Where do we fit in? So you've been seeing this, you started seeing something similar to this in grade 10, but a more simple version, and then again in grade 11. So let's just remind ourselves. So we have this big domain called the eukarya. Then under that we have the kingdom called Animalia. Under that we have the phylum, and we are phylum Chordata. Under that we have the class. Then we have the order, which is primates. The family, which is Hominidae. Then we have the genus, which is Homo, and we have the species, which is the Homo sapiens. Okay, so that's where we fit in this animal kingdom. So you can already see that there's a broader umbrella which we all fit under. So furthermore, here we have, now we are looking at the family. We're just going to look from the family name over here, and our family is the Hominidae. Right? And the Hominidae is divided into the Homininae and the Ponginae. The Ponginae division is what gives rise to our today species orangutan. And then the Homininae is going to give rise to the Homininini, the Gorillinini, and that is then going to be our gorilla on the side. And then we have the Homo coming from the Homininini and the Pan. The Pan is the chimpanzee, and then the Homo is basically going to become where our humans are coming from. So what I want you to see here is that this family or this our place in our animal kingdom that we are showing you now is showing you that it's not that we come from the apes. It's not that we come from the orangutan and the gorilla. We are just in the same family as them. And as I usually like to say, you know, it's not like our human family, but they are our cousins. Okay, they are our cousins. We can see that at some point we actually originated from the same common ancestor. Not necessarily from the gorilla and the chimpanzee or from the monkeys or apes that we know at the moment, but we come from the common ancestor, and then we made off a branch. As you can see, we clearly branched off at this point. Right, so we spoke about the Hominidae, that's our family name, and now it's very important to mention our scientific names. So you've seen this first in grade 10, that we have a genus and a species name. There are 2 words. The genus name, this is the, it's the first word. It's the first letter of the first word is with a capital letter, and then the first letter of the second word is with a small letter. That is how you write the species name. Gorilla, this would mean that the gorilla is the genus, the first word, and the second word, gorilla, is the species name. Pan troglodytes is the same. And they are also shortened as follows: capital H dot sapiens, and then this word genus, the plural of that word is genera. Okay, so genus is the singular and genera is the plural. So when you are asked how many genera are there in this diagram or in this illustration, then you would count how many are all the genus names that you see. Now, we can't write in italics. Can you see that it's in italics here? There are two words and it's in italics. We can't write in italics. So what we need to do is we need to make sure that our first letter is the first letter of the first word is a capital, the first letter of the second word is a small letter, and that the words are underlined when you are writing it. So this is now the interpretation of the phylogenetic tree, and here we have a simplified diagram of the phylogenetic tree, and you can see where we sit here at the top. So here we have a common ancestor down here, and how speciation occurred and how we branched off and how we basically developed characteristics to become the species that we are today. So what is a phylogenetic tree? It's a schematic form that shows the evolutionary relationships within a set of organisms or a group of organisms. And if we break up the word philo means is referring to the organism's phylum group, and then genetic is from the genes or relationship between the genes. But this phylogenetic tree should not be confused with a pedigree diagram, which is the genetic relationship between close family members. So pedigree diagrams you learned when you did genetics, and that is basically our family tree. But when we are looking at a phylogenetic tree, we are looking at evolutionary relationships within a family per se, but more specifically between species. So we are looking at our whole family being the Hominidae, but it's not a family tree, it is a tree. Phylogenetic tree shows relationships between different species. So here we have to think, what are we going to look at when we are looking at a phylogenetic tree? What are the things that we need to think about? That's what the speech bubble is telling us. We need to think, who is the common ancestor? Who is extinct? When did a species on the diagram originate? How long did they live? And when did they become extinct, etc.? This is all of the information that a phylogenetic tree can give us, and I'm going to show you how we are going to figure out these things. So let's just look at a simplified version of a phylogenetic tree before we actually bring in species. Right, let's have a look at this diagram on the right-hand side over here. So also we must understand that with phylogenetic trees, we can either they can see them in different ways. It can either go up, like in this way, reading from the bottom up, or it can be read from left to right or from right to left. It all depends. The first thing that you need to identify is where is the common ancestor, and you'll find that by the first, basically before the first branch. So if we look at this point over here, which is point number 1. Point number 1 is the common ancestor of all of these species, right? Number 1 is the common ancestor of all of those species. Then we had the first branch, and when we are branching off this way, we are looking at our descendants. Okay, so the first branch here, we're giving rise to this point here, number 2. This point number 2 is then the common ancestor of A, B, and C. Okay, because we're looking at this branch over here. Then we have another branch which came about after 2, which is at point number 3. And that point is the common ancestor of B and C. So we can apply that the same thing to this other line over here. Okay, but what we also need to understand here is that B and C are more closely related to each other compared to A. Because you see 2, their common ancestor was here, right? At 2, the 2 was the common ancestor of A, B, and C. But then there was another branch at 3 which made a new common ancestor, new characteristics developed. And that's what gave rise to B and C. So B and C are more closely related because their common ancestor comes sooner compared to A. And A, B, and C are more closely related to each other compared to D, E, F, G, and H, because when last did they branch? All over here at number 1, which was their common ancestor. So you need to understand that this process. Phylogenetic trees is a skill. Okay, it's a skill. And the only way that you can really get it, once you know the basics, you need to do enough practice so that you can expose yourself to different phylogenetic trees and different questions so that you can work out how to answer them. Now, can you see this one's a little bit different from what I showed you before? The one I showed you before was starting from the bottom, but this one is starting now from the left-hand side to the right-hand side. So how do we look at it? What I always say is, before we go into the different species and what's happening and looking at the lines, what we first need to do is identify where the timeline is. So this is the timeline, right? And in this particular one, we are starting with 0 here and we are going up this way. Right, so time is going that way. Why do we need to know this? Because can you see the scale is now going from 0, which is it's measured in million years ago, right? So we're starting at 0, and this 0 is the present day. And then we're going to 5, and this is in the past. Okay, so once you've identified which way it goes, now you want to identify where is your common ancestor. And where would you find your common ancestor? Would you find it now in the present, or would you find it in the past? You would find it in the past. So then we go there, and we have this point over here is now the common ancestor. Okay, the arrow is also showing us that. Then from the common ancestor, we have the descendants. This is the first branch. Okay, these are the descendants. And here we have the first one over here is the Australopithecus afarensis. Okay, that's the first species that originated after the common ancestor. And then we have another branch. So every time we get to a point where we get to this branching, we have here a new common ancestor. Okay, then we have that branch. And then we got the Homo erectus, and then we came into, and we had another branch there, the Homo sapiens. Right, so when the line reaches the 0, so 0, remember I said it's the present. So if the line reaches the 0, that means that that organism is still present today. We find that organism, which is Homo sapiens, it's us. We are still here. But when we have this situation here, can you see here that this line all of a sudden just ends in the middle of the graph? Why is it ending there? What does it mean when it ends there? This means extinction. This means that at this point, this species became extinct. Okay. Now, how do we read things off the graph? Now that we've understood what is happening in this graph, now we need to talk about how do we read things off this graph. Okay. So let's ask different questions. At what point, where is the common ancestor? When did the common ancestor originate? So we go then to the first dot and we draw a line down, actually at this point over here, and we take a ruler. It is very important that in your life sciences exam, you bring a ruler with numbers. A ruler with numbers and lines so that you can see exactly, you can use it to read off information from a graph. So you're going to put your ruler here, you're going to draw a line, or you're going to use your ruler to measure at what point it is, and it is, you draw a line down to the timeline, and you get 5 million years ago. If I had to ask you when did Homo habilis originate, you would take this point, A. robustus. When did A. robustus originate? You would go to A. robustus and then you'll take the line all the way, and then you'll draw a line down once again, and it is 3 million years ago. When did it become extinct? You draw another line going all the way down, right? And then you read off, what is this? What point is this? It is 1.5. Not 2.5, because I know you usually want to go this, you normally read your graph going the other way, so then you would think that this is now 2.5, but it's 1.5, because remember 0 is over here and 5 is over here. So that's when it became extinct. If we had to ask, for how long was the organism alive for, if you're looking at this line over here, for how long was it in existence? Then you would say the 3, so when it originated, subtract when did it become extinct, and then you would say 3 minus 1.5, and you're going to get 1.5 million years. Why am I saying million years and not million years ago? Because for how long something existed, it would be for how many years it was around. But when we are looking about when it originated from or when it became extinct, it happened already, it's in the past. Therefore, it happened so many million years ago because it happened in the past. Okay, so once you understand these basic skills, it will be easy to apply your knowledge. So let's see if you can get it right. So we have a question here. The diagram below represents the possible evolution of humans as well as the time period for the evolution of bipedalism, use of stone tools, and use of fire. So first we need to analyze the diagram before we need to look at the question. So when we analyze the diagram, we see over here that we have keys. This one looking different. This one looks different from the previous two that I gave you, but now we need to look at the skills that I taught you. right? Let's first look at the timeline. Let's first figure out what is the time, where's the timeline? So it's over here, a million years ago, and then here's the present, and then here at 5 is going to be the past. Okay, do that for yourself so that you know. And then they told us that is the evolution of humans, okay? And then they told us that they are using different time periods, and it's showing us different things. So we look at the key. You can see at the bottom here, they've given us a key. So the shaded blocks are showing us the Australopithecus species. The diagonal lines are showing us the Homo species. And then the polka dots, you could say, is the Ardipithecus species. Right, now we can answer the questions. Okay, and then also there's another key. Sorry, here at the top, they're showing us bipedalism, use of tools, and use of fire. So what this is showing us is that the bipedalism applies to anything that falls under this umbrella, between this point and this point. Everything that falls under there would apply to bipedalism. Everything that falls between this point and this point would apply to the use of tools. And anything between this point and this point would fall under the use of fire. Okay, so that's how we read this off. And then the other thing that we need to read off is that when it originated. So if we look at Homo erectus here, it originated at this point, and we had it extinct at this point. You see, so that block is showing us, the length of that block is showing us the duration. Okay, so you see it's a bit complicated if it's something that you haven't seen before, but now you've seen it. So there's one more that you've seen compared to what you've seen before. Name the 2 genera that were bipedal but did not use fire. So now we need to ask for the 2 genera, okay? So genera is not the whole species name, it's only the first word, okay? So let's first go to which ones were bipedal. So like I showed you, bipedal is between here and here, but they're saying they did not use fire. So it cannot be these ones, right? It cannot be anything that fits under this one. So it has to be the others, right? So what do we have? It's that we're definitely going to have A, which is the Australopithecus, okay? And the other A, which is standing for the Ardipithecus, because you see this one also falls under there. So if you said A. afarensis and A. africanus, or you said A. ramidus, you cannot get the mark because the question is asking you for the genus. When did A. afarensis evolve? Okay, so we go to A. afarensis over here. When did it evolve? Okay, so we're going to draw a line over here. And it was, draw a line to the bottom. And it is 4 million years ago. Okay, I just want to backtrack a little bit. When we are looking at the block, we are looking at when it originated. It would be at this point, the first point. At this point is when it originated, and this point is when it became extinct. Okay, I think I did it the other way just now. Right, so A. afarensis, it evolved at 4 million years ago. So you take your ruler, you draw a line to the bottom. How long did it take for the hominin species to start using fire after they were bipedal? Okay, so you say you go to the hominin species, right? You go to using fire. So how long did it take? You go to 4.5 million years ago. So you get years 4.5 and you subtract 1 and it is 3.5 million years ago. Okay, that's how you are going to work it out, right? You're going to take your 4.5 at this point minus your 1 at this point, because at 1, this is when they started to use fire. So for how long did they not under bipedalism? You take the beginning of the bipedalism and you subtract the beginning of the fire, and that's how you get 3.5 million years ago. Right, now this is a different phylogenetic tree. It's also similar to the one that I showed you previously. So here you can see that P is the common ancestor of all of these species. Name the type of diagram represented on the left. Now this question is almost always asked, okay? What type of diagram is represented here? And the answer is a phylogenetic tree. Not a phylogenic tree, right? Not a pedigree. It is a phylogenetic tree. You need to make sure that you get the spelling correct for this one, otherwise you are not going to get the mark. Sometimes we even see dihybrid cross here. It is not. It is a phylogenetic tree. Give the letter of the organism which is the common ancestor of all the hominids. Now, firstly, they ask you for the letter. We know when you're being taught, you are being taught who is the common ancestor of the hominids, but they're not asking us that. They're asking us in this diagram to give the letter of the organism. Okay, and it's the common ancestor of all hominids. So if these are all our hominids over here, the common ancestor would be here at P. And then the letter of the organism which shares the most recent common ancestor with the gorilla. Okay, so now we have which one is going to share the most common ancestor with the gorilla, and it is then R. Okay, because here we have the gorilla and here is R, and this is their common ancestor at Q. So the other organism which shares a common ancestor with the gorilla is R. Why is it not yeah, it's R. Yes. Right. Then we come to the next question. Name 2 organisms that have S as a common ancestor. Okay, so we go to S. Where is S? And then the 2 that have S as a common ancestor is the bonobo and the chimpanzee. See, here's S. So these are the 2. Right, bonobo and the chimpanzee. And then name 2 organisms that are quadrupedal. Right, 2 quadrupedal, they would be, so you can, they only want 2, but there's more than 2. I'll mention all of them. So those are the ones that are going to be walking on all 4 limbs. It's the orangutan, the gorilla, the bonobo, the chimpanzee. Right, those are the 4 possible ones, but they only asked you for 2. Let's just talk about that a little bit of exam techniques. If they ask you for 2 organisms, then they want you to only mention 2. So that means, for example, for this one over here, have S as a common ancestor. If you had said human, bonobo, chimpanzee. So let's say, for example, you said human, then bonobo, then chimpanzee. How it would be marked is as follows. You wouldn't get the first mark. You would get bonobo, and you would not get this mark because we apply the principle of mark the first 2 only, because the question asked you for 2. That doesn't only go for phylogenetic trees and evolution, it goes for everything in life sciences. If they ask you for 2, then they're going to mark the first 2. Okay. Describe 3 anatomical features of the skeleton of a quadrupedal hominid. Okay, so what are the features we have of their skeleton? So this question does come a little bit later as well when we are doing the similarities and the differences, but we can still talk about it. Okay, the quadrupedal hominids, they have a C-shaped spine. Their pelvis is long and narrow, and their foramen magnum is at a more forward position. Okay, we'll look at it again in more detail later, and then we will recap on this. Right, now we're coming to the differences and similarities between humans and apes. But before I get there, I just want to do a little recap. Phylogenetic trees is a skill. Answering questions on phylogenetic trees is a skill. So you need to take time to get the skill right. You need to understand the basics of the phylogenetic tree and how to read it. And then you need to expose yourself to many questions on the phylogenetic tree. And you will see that the more questions you do, they ask similar things. But it's nothing that you can really study for, because you never know what they're going to ask you. They don't have to give you a phylogenetic tree on the hominids, which you are studying. They can give you a phylogenetic tree on anything. Elephants, fish, any sort of species that they can think of, they can give it to you on. Right, differences and similarities between humans and apes. So let's first look at the similarities. Okay, so we like to use this little diagram here to explain it, and it is numbered nicely. And in this one, I've actually color coded it so that for those of you that are visual learners and learn with color, maybe it can help you to understand. So let's first start with the head region. Number 1, they have large brains or skulls compared to their body mass. What do we mean by that? Okay, let me give you an example. Let's look at an elephant. Okay, an elephant is a really big animal. Okay, and we are the size that we are. But our brain, if you have to take our brain out of our skull and we have to take out the elephant's brain, the elephant's brain is going to be much larger than our brain. But it doesn't mean we are not looking at that over here. What we're looking at here is that compared to our body size, that yes, the elephant's brain is very big compared to our brain, but its brain size compared to its body size is small, whereas ours are large. We have large brains compared to our body mass. Okay, so if we look at an African ape, they also have a large brain compared to their body mass. And we have a large brain compared to our body mass. Then we have eyes in front, we have binocular vision or stereoscopic vision, and we also have eyes with cones and or color vision. Okay, so that's everything to do in the red head region. I made it blue. Large brains compared to their body mass, eyes in front, eyes with color vision. Then we look at the arm. Okay, we have freely rotating arms. You can actually practice this, right? And to remember, we have freely rotating arms. That's what it means. We have longer upper arms. Okay, this is what we mean by the upper arm. Elbow joints allow the rotation of the forearm. So here's our elbow joint, right? And it allows this rotation of this forearm. Okay. And then we go on to our hands, right? We have 5 fingers, opposable thumbs, which work in opposite direction to the other fingers. Can you see these are going like this, but this one's going this way, right? That's what we mean by that. Flat nails instead of claws, right? Flat nails instead of claws, or bare fingertips, you could say. Right, so that's everything to do with our hand. That's in green. 2 mammary glands, and then we have eyes with cones. Okay, we did that one already, sorry. And then we have the last one I didn't say is sexual dimorphism. Okay, so these are the similarities. You need to know them. Like I said, use your body to explain. We have larger craniums than compared to their body mass. We have eyes in front. We have color vision, freely rotating arms, long upper arms, elbow joints allowing the rotation, 5 fingers, opposable thumb, flat nails, 2 mammary glands, and sexual dimorphism. Now, what are the differences between the humans and the African apes? Okay, so here we have, we are looking at the different criteria here. There are 6 that are mentioned, but this is a table comparing them. We're going to go into them in more detail, okay, and then we're going to do some activities where I'm going to explain it better. So we're first looking at the first one is bipedalism and quadrupedalism. Bipedalism, that means that they can walk on 2 lower limbs. Okay, or 2 hind limbs. They walk on their 2 lower limbs or hind limbs, whereas the quadrupedal, they walk on all 4s. Okay, so basically they would be more hunched over, right? So what assists with us to have bipedalism? It's the fact that we have a foramen magnum in a forward position. Now, what is the foramen magnum? Okay, it is the hole at the bottom of the skull. I'll show you in the picture, but the hole at the bottom of the skull, which the spinal cord basically, or the vertebral column, the spinal cord is going to be coming out of or attaches at that point. So in the bipedalism, it's in a forward position, and in quadrupedal organisms, they are in a more backward position. The shape of the spine, in bipedalism, the shape of the spine is S-shaped, and in quadrupedalism, it is C-shaped. In bipedalism, it has a shorter and wider pelvic girdle, and in quadrupedalism, longer and narrow pelvic girdle. Now we look at the cranium size. In humans, it's larger, and in apes, it's smaller. So now a lot of learners get confused. Why are we saying that as a similarity, we are talking about the cranium size of the brain as well? But that's different. The similarity with us is that we have a large brain compared to our body mass. But our difference is between the human and the African ape. The difference between them is that the humans is larger, their brain is larger than the African ape. Then the palate shape. In humans, it's semicircular or it's rounded. In African apes, it is rectangular. The dentition, humans don't have gaps between their teeth, and they have small canines, whereas African apes have gaps between their teeth, which is called the diastema, and they have large canines. And then we have prognathous and non-prognathous. Prognathous is basically the protrusion of the bottom part, the protrusion of the jaw. Okay, so in humans we are non-prognathous because we've got this flat face. We don't have this protrusion. And then the African apes is prognathous. They've got this protrusion and they've got a sloped face. Then we have cranial and brow ridges. We don't have cranial and brow ridges. This is the cranial ridge over here. These are the brow ridges. We do not, ours are absent or less pronounced, and the cranial and brow ridges are present or more prominent in the African apes. Okay, so let's look at some diagrams to help us explain this, because it's not very easy to understand if I'm just saying words, right? We need to actually look, what is ma'am talking about here? You need to study the diagrams of these. Okay, so that's just a speech bubble to remind you that when you're looking at this PowerPoint presentation later, that you also need to look at the diagrams of these, because 10 to 1, you're going to be getting a diagram comparing these in the exam that you're going to have to answer questions on. Right, so humans and African apes, right? The first one is bipedalism here. The first difference we're looking at is bipedalism. And we are looking in this particular one is the position of the foramen magnum. Remember I told you it's the position of the foramen magnum. It is the shape of the spine, and it is the pelvis. Okay, so we're going to look at those three in more detail. So you can see here we have 4 skulls, right? So the foramen magnum is pointing at where the arrows are pointing. Okay, that is the hole that I'm talking about. So when they are in the African apes, we say that it's in a more backward position. So that's like in number 1, right? It's in a more backward position. You can see over there. So it's not at the back, it is in a backward position. Whereas number 4 over here, you can see number 4, it's in a more forward position. We don't say it's in the middle, we don't say it's in the center, we say that it's in a more forward position. And this allows the spinal cord to enter vertically. Okay, so when it is in a more forward position, it's positioned in that way because the spinal cord is going to enter there. So it allows it to enter vertically. That's what helps us to be upright and to be for bipedalism. Whereas in quadrupedal, in African apes or quadrupeds, it's in a more backward position because their spine is going to enter in a more slanted way, not vertically, right? More horizontally. So there's diagrams to explain to you where they are entering. Can you see here the spinal cord is here entering towards the back, therefore it's in a more backward position, the foramen magnum, and here it's entering vertically. Okay. Then we've got the shape of the spine. So here we have a gorilla. The first picture is showing us a C-shaped spine. You can see the drawing there also shows us that the line drawn also shows us that it's C-shaped, and that's for quadrupeds. And then the humans, it's an S shape, and it's that allows for bipedalism. Then we have the pelvic girdles. In bipedal organisms, the gorilla has a long and narrow pelvis, and then the human has a short and wide pelvis. Now, what I want to show you here is that what we are talking about when we say long and narrow. So this is the whole pelvis, right? This part over here is now showing us this bone here. Okay. So if you look at that bone and you take that bone, when we are looking at long, we are looking at this arrow over here. It's long. And we're looking at this point here to show us that it is narrow. Okay, whereas in this one we have it is shorter, because you can see this is short compared to that. It's short, but it's wider going this way. So now you understand what we mean when we are looking at something and we're saying that it's long and narrow, or it is short and wide. Right, so here shows you also another diagram to show you all of these differences, and now it can show you all in one: the foramen magnum, the spine, plus the pelvic girdle. Okay, so you can see how all of those things come together to allow for the bipedalism over here and the quadrupedalism over there. Okay, now we move on to the size of the brain and the cranium size. So what is the cranium? The cranium is the spot. Right, this one here. It's the part of the skull where the brain is found. This whole part is the skull. All these bones, the facial bones, the jaw, plus the cranium, that is the skull. But the cranium is only this portion here, which is going to house the brain. The bigger cranium indicates bigger brain, and humans have a larger brain to body size. Okay, we spoke about that. Now we look at the palate shape. So we spoke that the humans have a curved palate. You can see this is more curved compared to this rectangular one. Okay? And also the human's jaw is smaller compared to the chimp or the African ape, which has a bigger jaw. You can see there in these pictures also. Look at the chimpanzee's jaw. You can see that definite rectangle shape. Okay, whereas humans have the more curved one. This is the human one. You can see it is more curved. Okay, so when you have these pictures in front of you, it's clear to see them. And you're also going to get diagrams. You won't get pictures like this, but you get diagrams in the exam that you need to identify where you can see look for the rectangle shaped jaw. Then when we can look at the dentition, you can see the larger canine. You can see this canine over here. You can see the canine over there. You can see that they have larger canines, the African apes, and they also have this gap, which is called the diastema. Then we have the prognathus. It means the projecting jaw, as I mentioned before. African apes have bigger jaws, and humans have a flatter face. Okay, you can show this. You can see the slope there. You can see the slopes with the differences between them. The African apes have the sloping face, and it's the prognathus jaw, and also the can you see that the cranium is also sloped back forward. The forehead is sloped backwards. That's what also gives this whole sloping face. Whereas in humans, the forehead is here in front. We don't have the prognathus, so we have a flat face. And humans also have a chin, whereas they don't. Let's look at the cranial ridges. This is where the cranial ridge would be. Okay. It is for muscle attachment. Okay, because remember, the gorillas, they have the jaws are larger because also the food that they eat, okay, and what they had to do and how they had to, eat their food, and it's all got to do with their diet. Sorry, that's the word I was looking for, the diet. So we have muscle attachment. So this cranial ridge allows for greater muscle attachment, for stronger muscles. Then we have the brow ridges. Okay, then you can see here it's prominent. You can see definitely, you can see it's basically like absent here. It's very underdeveloped, whereas we have this definite brow ridge with the gorillas. Right, so what did the diagnostic report say? Because, you know, we've got these pictures, we've got everything, but what did learners do wrong? The diagnostic report is a report that tells us where learners went wrong. Okay, or the common errors that learners made, and then some recommendations for teachers for how to help learners with this. So as learners, it's also important for us to know. So and I mentioned these things before, so we are just being more, we are just now cementing it. There's a difference between the skull and the cranium. I explained that to you. The cranium is part of the skull where the brain is housed in. When we talk about the differences between the jaws of humans and African apes, we don't talk about more or less prognathus. They are either prognathus or they are non-prognathus. But you can say that we have a more protruding jaw and a less protruding jaw. Those are words that are accepted. But non-prognathus and prognathus, those are the two words that you need to use. Okay. But foramen magnum in humans is in a more forward position, not in the center or in the front or in the middle. It's in the forward position. And bipedalism is the ability to walk on two lower limbs, not only limbs, because arms are also limbs. So you have to specify that we mean the lower limb or the hind limb. Then also coming from the diagnostic report about the fossils in South Africa, Nonhlanhla, my partner, will be telling you more information on that, but it was poorly answered, and there's one thing I can tell you is that you need to know the fossils that were found, the fossils, who found the fossils, you need to know the fossil names, and all of them, they are clearly stipulated in the examination guideline. You need to know them. Right, now let's do an activity. This diagram is showing diagram A and B. It shows the ventral, meaning the bottom view of the skulls of two organisms. And it's important to note that the diagrams were not drawn to scale. Okay, so you just need to look at them. In this particular one, they are showing us the foramen magnum. That was nice of them. They don't always have to show you that is the foramen magnum. You should know, right? Which diagram represents the skull of a bipedal organism? So you must now think for yourself, what did I say about bipedal organisms? We said that we spoke about the pelvis, but we can't see the pelvis here, so we cannot talk about it. We spoke about the shape of the spine. We cannot mention that either, because we don't have it here in front of us. And the third one is the foramen magnum, which we do have. So it would be the foramen magnum would have to be in a more forward position, so it would be organism B. Give one visible reason for your answer. So you see, while you were actually figuring this out and you were talking it through, we actually got the answer. The answer is that it's because the foramen magnum is in a more forward position. Now we come to a tabulate question. Tabulate two visible differences. Those three words are the most important three words, because they're telling us what we need to do. We need to construct a table. We need to have two differences, but they need to be visible. And differences of what? It's between the upper jaws in diagram A and B. Okay, the upper jaws. So you cannot just talk about anything. When you are doing this, you need to talk about, in this diagram, the visible differences in this diagram with the jaws. So we are looking at this and we're looking at this. Here you can't talk about craniums, and you're not going to talk about the spine. You're not going to talk about any of the other differences that I told you. You're going to tabulate two visible differences between the upper jaws of diagram A and diagram B. Okay. That represent trends in human evolution. So when you're asked to construct a table, you're going to construct a table that looks like this. And you're going to have diagram A and you're going to have diagram B. You're going to write diagram as well, right? If you just do that and you don't have anything else, you're going to get 1 mark per table. But if you don't draw a table and you just draw a line down the center, you're not going to get that mark. If you don't put column headings, you are not going to get a mark. It needs to be a fully constructed table with column headings in order for you to get that 1 mark. Okay, so let's look at the diagram. Look at that beautiful table that's there. Okay, and then it's mark 2 only. I'll go to those just now, but let's just look at the diagram. Can you see it's a fully constructed diagram? And then you would get 1 mark for the table because the column headings are there and it's a full table. Now, you can see it's numbered there. It's very important that when you get a tabulate question that you also number, because when you tabulate, you must be able to compare like items and like items. This goes for anything, not only for human evolution. Okay, so when you number, then it helps you to keep your thoughts in line, okay, or to make sense. So number 1, on this side, you're talking about the canines. Can you talk about the canines? Yes, it's part of the upper jaw. So we are talking here that the diagram A has larger canines and diagram B has smaller canines. Okay, so when you're talking about larger canines on this side, you cannot be talking about the diastema on that side. You need to talk about like things, 1 and 1. Number 2, we are talking about the diastema. So it's present in diagram A and there's no diastema in diagram B. Then we have number 3, jaws with teeth in a rectangular or a U shape. And in diagram B, we have jaws with teeth on a gentle or a round curve. And then number 4, we have more protruding jaws, or we can say prognathus. You can say more protruding, you can say prognathus. You cannot say more prognathus. See, that's the difference. Then on the other side for diagram B, it is less protruding jaw or it is non-prognathus. It is not less prognathus. Okay. And then we have mark 2 first, mark first to only. As I said, the question asks you to tabulate 2 differences, so you need to only mention, we will only mark the first 2. So make sure that your first 2 are correct. And then we have number 1 for the table. That's how you're going to get your marks over there. Then we've got one last question. Explain the significance of the shape of the spine that is associated with the skull in diagram B. So now you cannot see the skull, but they are asking you, right? The significance of the shape of the spine associated with the skull in diagram B. So you need to see for yourself, because the other questions were leading you to tell you that this is a bipedal organism. Okay, so what is the shape of it? Firstly, it is an S-shaped spine. That was a compulsory mark. I'll talk to you about that just now. Let's first answer the question. The spine is S-shaped. Now, what is the significance about that? So you first have to say, what is the shape? Then you need to explain. When we ask you to explain, you need to give us a cause and effect manner. So the spine is S-shaped. What does this allow to happen? What is the effect of this? The effect is that it supports the upper body weight. It's for shock absorption and for flexibility. Okay, so whenever you answer, you have to answer in a cause and effect. So this is the cause and these are the effect. Okay, and then now let me tell you about this compulsory mark. Okay, that's just basically for the marker to see, but it's also important for you to know because you need to answer the question. Okay, you need to answer the question. Learners are losing marks. They use the compulsory mark. The compulsory mark means that that mark must be there. So if the question is out of 2 and you don't have the compulsory mark, but you've got these 2 other points, you still cannot get 2. You will only get 1 because you didn't mention the S-shaped spine. You just spoke about the significance of the spine. You didn't talk about what is so special about the spine associated with diagram B. Right, then we have one last question before we move on. We have the diagrams of 3 skulls. Arrange the skulls A, B, and C from the oldest to the youngest. So the youngest being the most recent. Okay, so the oldest one would be the most primitive one, so the ones with the smaller cranium. Okay, so and the larger jaws, that will be B, and then we're going to get C, and then we're going to have A. So you can see over time that these things have now changed. The cranium has become larger, and you can also see from the jaws, and you can look at the brow ridges when you're going to come to this answer. Describe the significance of the difference in the cranium size between skulls A and skull C. What is the difference? Now they're asking, not asking what the difference is. Describe the significance. Okay, so what is so significant about the difference of the cranium size? And it is the cranium of skull A is larger than the cranium of skull C, indicating an increase in the brain capacity or the intelligence. Okay, so when they ask you to describe, you just basically have to explain and show, explain in your answer what you're seeing there. Then another question, last question, describe 2 visible differences in the structure of the jaw of skulls A and B. Okay, so we did this in the previous one, but remember it's visible differences. So what can you see in these diagrams? That it's of A and B. The skull A is not prognathous, okay, than skull B. Skull A has a well-defined chin, whereas skull B does not. Skull A has a smaller jaw, whereas skull B has a larger jaw. So in this one, we can't speak about the diastema because you can't see it. That's how it's different from the previous one. In this one, we could speak about the chin. In the previous one, we couldn't speak about the chin because the previous question was talking about the upper jaw. So it's very important that you look at the question nicely. It's not always about what you studied. You need to apply what you studied to the question that's in front of you and the diagram that has been given to you. And in this particular question, the previous one, you had to tabulate the differences. So you could just put the one on the one side and the one on the other side. This one is telling us to describe the differences. So you need to say, skull A is prognathous or less protruding than skull B. You cannot just say skull A is prognathous, skull A is well defined, skull B is smaller. You need to compare A and B. Compare what they are telling you to compare. Thank you. That's all from me. We're going to have a short break and then I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Nonhlanhla Mshali. Thank you.
learners, welcome to the second session of Life Sciences lesson. I'm going to continue from where my colleague Vedika left off, and today we are still looking at human evolution. We're going to look at the evidence of common ancestors for living hominids, including humans. So we've already done some of the things here under phylogenetic trees and the characteristics and the differences between the apes and the humans. So now what we are going to look at is the evidence that is out there which still supports human evolution. So according to the exam guideline, which is our Bible, we always refer to this as our Bible because everything that you need to know for end of the year is in this booklet. So on the exam guideline, what we need to know is the lines of evidence that support the idea of common ancestors of living hominids, including humans. So what we are going to look at, we're going to look into fossil evidence, genetic evidence, and cultural evidence. And when we look into fossil evidence, we look into fossil evidence and into the three genera. Vedika did explain what is the difference between a genera and the species name. So the genera that we are going to look into, the three, are the Ardipithecus, Australopithecus, and the Homo genera. We're also going to look at the age of each fossil, when was it found, its existence, and who found it, and where exactly was it found. So that is the only thing that we're going to look into today. Moving on. So the lines of evidence that support human evolution, when we look into them, there's only three. Like I've mentioned, what is indicated on the exam guideline, we said it is fossil evidence, and then we also look at the genetic evidence. When we talk about genetic evidence, the main focus here is mainly on the mitochondrial DNA. So this is the type of evidence that we talk about under genetic evidence when we speak to human evolution. And then there's also cultural evidence where we look into the artifacts, things such as tools, etc. These are all three of these contribute to what we now know about human evolution. So with the fossil evidence, there was something that was mentioned earlier about the fossil evidence and what was mentioned in the diagnostic report. So here, it's some of the things that we're going to talk about here is the things that you learned in grade 10. Already, some of you, I know when you're looking at this diagram, you can see that this bed, you see it every time. When you talk of fossils, the Archaeopteryx is always there because it is an example of a transitional species. So what are we looking into fossil evidence? We're looking at the anatomical features that are being compared and placed in sequence from simple to complex. Because remember, we say with evolution, life started in a simple form and then over millions of years, because these changes that we are talking about, they take place over millions and millions of years. It's not something that happened yesterday and then we come back the next day, there's a change. So that's one of the things that we need to understand, that when we talk about evolution, it has changes that have taken place over long periods of time. So with the fossil evidence, we also, between the species, we also come across things that are called transitional species. So what does fossils tell us about transitional species? We learn that in the evolution, when things are placed in timeline, somewhere in between, you find that there are species that are called transitional. What are transitional species? These are the species that display the characteristics of those that it follows and the one that it precedes. So when you look at the diagram on the left, there's a dinosaur and there's a pigeon, and then we have this one in between, which is called the Archaeopteryx. So when you look at the features of this bed here, it has the features of the dinosaurs. It also has the features of the pigeon above. So it is the good example of what a transitional species is. So a transitional species, it is that species that has characteristics that are common to both an ancestor species and the descendant species that follows. So they have characteristics of the features that belong to both groups. Then with the, okay, I did say that this is an example of a transitional species. And then while we're looking at the fossil evidence, we're going to look at the sites in Africa where the fossils were found, mainly focusing on the ones that are in South Africa. So in your exam guideline, when you read there, you will see that they will tell you that focus more on the ones that are found in South Africa. We are not saying that the ones that are found in everywhere else in the world are not important, but we are interested in more that are found closer to us. So this is a map of Africa which shows the sites, the Great Rift Valley, where most of the fossils were found. And then the South African fossil site, we have Cradle of the Humankind, which is up there. I know some of you have been there, your teachers have taken you there, and there are so many interesting things to see if you go there. And we also have this area, which is the Sterkfontein, the Swartkrans, and the Kromdraai. All those are areas where the different fossils in South Africa were found. So some of those fossils that we are referring to are the Australopithecus africanus, Homo habilis, Homo erectus, and the Paranthropus robustus. These are all the fossils that were found in the areas that we've indicated in the South African map. So the fossil evidence, then what does it tell us about human evolution? We remember earlier you looked into the size of the brain, the capacity that in relation to the body. So the evidence that have been found on fossils and the evolution of humans, and when it's put together, it shows that there has been an evolution or an evolvement of the brain from the smallest, from this genera, which is the Ardipithecus, to the largest from this genera, which is the Homo. As you can see, the arrow there, it shows that from here we had a smaller brain, or these had a smaller brain, but through evolution, the current humans that are present now, they have a larger brain capacity compared to the Ardipithecus. So the Ardipithecus, the first genera that we're going to look into, we are told that these were living in trees and they were occasionally bipedal. So they will still swing on trees, they will still move on their all four limbs, but they were occasionally bipedal and they had a small brain. And then we had Australopithecus. There are a lot of species that we're going to look into under Australopithecus. Again, here the brain from small to bigger, and these now were more bipedal. But the two of them, when you study, you will learn more that these had longer arms, because remember they were swinging in trees, so they need to have longer arms for that. And then now the present one, which is the Homo, these ones have a bigger brain. They are bipedal, it means they only use two limbs, their hind limbs, to walk, and they use two. So that's more, there's more that is added onto the Homo genera. So these are the three ones, and they are sequenced from the oldest to the youngest. So we're going to look at the features as they gradually changed over time. So with this section, grade 12, if you take your Mind the Gap, your DBE book, the green one, your DBE study guide. Okay, let me start with the Mind the Gap and the DBE study guide. There's a table where all these species are put into. So what you look into, you must know the name of the species, you must know when did it exist, and where was it found, and who discovered the fossil. So in the DBE study guide and in the Mind the Gap, there's also an additional column there where they talk about the features, the characteristics, what differentiates, what is the difference between the Ardipithecus and the Australopithecus. Things like the brain size, things like the spaces between the teeth, all the characteristics that you looked into prior to this section, those are the things that are added there. But mainly what is important according to your exam guideline is the name, where, by whom, and where was it found. So another thing that most of the grade 12 learners will be asking us is are we supposed to know these names? Yes, you must know the names. Even if the spelling is not 100% correct, but it must not change the meaning of the word. So the first one, the earliest one, is the Ardipithecus ramidus. We all know about this. When was it found, or when did it exist? It was 5 to 4 million years ago, and it was found in Ethiopia, and it was discovered by whom? By Tim White. So this is one of the smallest hominin. It weighed about, the adult size weighed about 50 kilograms, and there were about 17 fossils that were found which belonged to this species. So it is also regarded as one of those which was an intermediate between the what? The apes and the humans. Also, when you look at the second genera, which is the Australopithecus, fossil evidence shows us that there was once Australopithecus afarensis, Australopithecus africanus, and Australopithecus sediba. These are also the fossils that were found, which are also contributing to what? To human evolution. Because remember earlier when you started with evolution, your teachers told you that evolution is what? It is a theory. And then you said, why is it a theory? Because there's lots of scientific evidence out there that has been proven to support that evolution is a theory. So hence we are looking at all these, and the types of evidence that we're looking into currently is the fossil evidence. So this Australopithecus afarensis, which we commonly refer to as Lucy, when did it exist? About 3.9 to 2.8 million years ago. It was found in Ethiopia, and it was found by whom? By Donald Johanson. And then the other one, we have the Australopithecus africanus, where we're looking also at the three species that are commonly known as, one of them was Daung child, Mrs. Bless, Littlefoot. All three of them, these ones are very important because these were found in South Africa. So this row is very important. These were found in South Africa. Daung child 2.3 million years ago, Mrs. Bless 2.5 million years ago, Littlefoot 3.9 to 4.2 million years ago. And Daung child, as the name says, Daung, it was found in the village of Daung here in South Africa, and then the other two were found in the Sterkfontein caves, there on the cradle of the humankind, the Maroping. And they were found by Raymond Dart, Robert Broom, and Ron Clark. So some of you will be asking yourselves, do I need to know all of these? Yes, for some of the questions you will be asked to know of this by heart, because questions like for example, multiple choice type of question, or your 1.3 where you need to match the columns. So you need to know who, when, and the name of the species. We also have Australopithecus sediba, which we commonly know as Garabo. Garabo existed 1.95 million years ago. He was also found near the caves of Malapa, where again in South Africa, by Brett and Lee Berger. I know that in the June exam that was written earlier, there was a question where the learners were asked about who found Australopithecus sediba, and the answer that was needed there was Lee Berger. Again, going on here, we look, it's still fossil evidence. These are the fossils of the Daung. This is Daung child, Garabo, and Mrs. Bless, as they were discovered in South Africa and along the Rift Valley and in South Africa. And remember, when we talk of the Australopithecus genera, we're talking about the genera that lived 4 to 1.6 million years ago. And then the last group of genera that we are going to look into is the Homo genera. And the species that we're looking into is the Homo habilis, Homo erectus, Homo naledi, and Homo sapiens. Again, Homo habilis, this is the one that we commonly know as the handyman. I know when we teach, we always tell you that, remember, Homo habilis, handy. This is the handyman. This is where then there was evidence that they were making use of tools. Some of you have seen the type of tools that we used to teach in class, that box with the skulls and the different tools. Yes, it all started here from the Homo habilis. When did they exist? Between 2.2 and 1.6 million years ago. And the fossils to support this were found in Tanzania and by Louis and Mary Leakey around 1960. And then we also have Homo erectus. This is the upright man, because this is where it was clear that they are now what we're looking at the bipedal beings here. Again, when between 2 and 0.4 million years ago, They were found in Java, Indonesia. The fossils that belong to this species were found all over, and also in South Africa and in Kenya, and they were discovered by Eugene in 1981. Then we also have this one, which was recently discovered in 2015 by Lee Berger. This one is called Homo naledi, between 0.3 and 0.2 million years ago, or 335,000 to 236 years ago, and we're in the cradle of the humankind in South Africa. And then we have the last one, which is the living one. Out of all the genera that we have spoken about, the ones that are still living currently, which is us, are the Homo sapiens, and those ones came into existence 0.2 million years ago up until now, and the first fossils were discovered in Ethiopia of the earliest Homo sapiens. They were discovered in Ethiopia, and by whom? By Richard Leakey. So when you look at the genus Homo, we said it consists of one living species, which is what? The Homo sapiens. And then what is the difference between the genera, which is the Australopithecus, and this one, which is Homo? It is the fact that the Homo genus has a much larger brain, which is about 30% larger. And remember, you were told earlier that it is the capacity, the volume, how much we can process compared to our predecessors. So that is what the brain capacity that we are referring to. And remember, the larger the brain capacity, it means it associated with being more intelligent, which is why they were able, most of the species that belong to the Homo genera, that is when they started to make use of tools. And then there was what language involved there, different artifacts that we would come across, which are fossils that contribute to this. So it's an indication of this fact that the brain capacity was larger, therefore they were able to process a lot of information, indicating more intelligence compared to the Australopithecus and the Ardipithecus. Also, with human evolution, I did say earlier that there's also genetic evidence. So with genetic evidence, what scientists do, they look into the similarities and the differences between the genetic composition, especially the DNA of the species, so that they can tell whether the species are they closely related or they are not, so that they can tell whether do these species come from a common ancestor or not. And what exactly are we looking into? I told you earlier that we are looking into the mitochondrial DNA. So why? Because when you look at the mutations that takes place in the mitochondrial DNA, these are simpler to read, and they are simpler than the nuclear DNA, which is used to study the ancestry of females. So when you look into the mitochondrial DNA, why are we specifically talking about the mitochondrial DNA in relation to the females? If you go back to reproduction in term 2, or beginning towards the end of term 1, you were told that when the ovum is fertilized by the sperm cell, only the of the sperm cell goes into the ovum, only the head of the sperm cell goes into the ovum, but the mitochondria of the sperm cell does not go into there. It remains outside and it gets destroyed. So that is why when you look into tracing in relation to mitochondrial DNA, we always relate to the female ancestry, because the mitochondrial DNA that can be found is the one that belongs to the female, because the male one is destroyed during fertilization. And then we have cultural evidence. Again, here, what are we looking into? We're looking into the increasing complexity of items, such as the artifacts and the tools that were used. So those tools and the artifacts that are also an indication of of advances in evolution, and of the advances in the human intellect. The more advanced the tools they used, then that shows that they were more evolved than the previous one. Like us now, human beings, there's so many tools that we use. We're using computers, we're using so many things. Think about millions and million years to come, whether those that will be living around those times, they will be studying us, comparing to what we're using, the computer, the amount of intelligence. Maybe they will be even more intelligent than what we are now. So the development of stone tools also was also an indication of how the hominins evolved. Because I mean, using tool, coming up with a tool requires planning, and it also requires a lot of thinking so that you have a tool that you need if you want to cut something, to step something. Those were the tools that they came up with. And then while we're speaking about all of this, there's also this which is called out of Africa hypothesis. This comes up a lot also in all the past. If you look at the past exam question papers, you will see that there's many questions that revolve around out of Africa hypothesis. So what is this out of Africa hypothesis? Remember, this states that modern humans, they originated where? Modern humans originated in Africa. And then from there, they then emigrated to where? To different parts of the world, to different continents. So this is what out of Africa hypothesis states. It is hypothesis, it is not yet a theory, because there's still evidence that is being collected to support it. So two of the things that we look into when we talk about out of Africa hypothesis at the moment, what supports this hypothesis is the availability of fossils and also genetic evidence. So it's fossil evidence and genetic evidence. Okay, this is the simplest part, learners. The only thing that you must know, this is the only thing that is found in your exam guideline that you must know. So I said there's two types of evidence that support out of Africa. First being the fossil evidence. So what do we say under fossil evidence in relation to out of Africa hypothesis? We say that the fossils of the Ardipithecus and the also fossils of the what? Australopithecus were found where? Only in Africa. It's very important that the fossils of the Ardipithecus and the fossils of the Australopithecus were found in Africa only and nowhere else in the world. So again, with the Australopithecus, remember the examples that we did earlier, Garabo, Lectuefort, Daung Child, and Mrs. Pless. These were all found in Africa, some of them in South Africa and some of them on the Great Rift Valley. And then what else supports this out of Africa hypothesis is the fact that the oldest fossils of the Homo habilis and other bipedal organisms were also found where? In Africa. Also, the oldest fossils of the Homo erectus were found in Africa. And then later, some were found where? In Asia. And the youngest of these are now found anywhere else in the world, but their oldest were found in Africa. So how do you answer this? Explain out of Africa hypothesis or evidence that supports out of Africa hypothesis. You write it exactly as it appears here, exactly as it appears on your exam guidelines, to say the fossils of the Ardipithecus and the fossils of Australopithecus were only found in Africa, and then the oldest fossils of the Homo habilis and the oldest fossils of the Homo erectus were also only found in Africa. So that's out of Africa hypothesis. And then we also have genetic evidence that supports this, that the analysis of the mutations in the mitochondrial DNA also trace the oldest female ancestor to where? To East Africa, the Great Rift Valley. So all of this points to the fact that the modern humans originated where? In Africa, and then they later emigrated to where? To different parts of the world, to the different continents. Now let's look into questions. Remember all the other sections that you did in life sciences from beginning up until now. Most of the questions are application types of questions, application. With this section, specifically the last part of evolution, there's not really much on the application from your side, but it's mainly recall and your understanding. So let's look at this one. Here we're given the table that shows the information on selected hominid fossils. This table has the common name of the fossil, the species, the fossil site, and the responsible scientist. Just like I said to you earlier, that you will be asked, these are the only things that you need to know. So we have P, R, Q, and S. Here, the first row, we're looking at the Australopithecus sediba that was found in the Malapa caves in the cradle of the humankind. I know that most of you have seen this question. If you have not seen it, you already know that we said the common name for Usidiba, they are the ones, this is the one that is known as who? As Garabo. And who found Garabo? Did you say it was Lieberger or Raymond Dart? I think it's Lieberger. We'll see the answer now. And then the question says name fossil P. So we said fossil P, or the common name for fossil P is who? Is Garabo. So let's see if we are correct. Yes, it is Garabo. And then the next question says identify the species at R. So here we have Australopithecus sediba, and then we have Daumchild. Daumchild also belongs to this genera, which is Australopithecus, but it is Australopithecus africanus. And where were they found? In the Sterkfontein cave. So let's see the answer. Yes, it is Australopithecus africanus. Then give the name of the scientist at Q. So we said at Q, it is Lieberger who found the fossils that belong to Garabo. And then the scientist who found the fossils that belong to Daumchild, that person is Raymond Dart. So that is the first type of question that we're looking into. And then this is another question. Fossil evidence is used to support out of Africa hypothesis. Remember, I said it's only two, fossil and genetic. Then the question here says state out of Africa hypothesis. This is a recall question. So questions like this are non-negotiable. Learners, you need to go into your exam room knowing exactly well what is out of Africa hypothesis. I mean, in life sciences, we hardly ever find questions where you just name, give, or state. State, those are easy marks. Those are the marks that we must all get. So state the out of Africa hypothesis. We did say that it states that modern humans originated where? In Africa, and then they later emigrated to different parts of the world. So for 2 marks, all that you need to name is that modern humans originated in Africa and they migrated to other parts of the world. Then describe how fossil evidence is used to support out of Africa hypothesis. For 6 marks, look at the marks. And what did we talk about earlier? We said fossils of the Ardipithecus and fossils of what? Australopithecus. Those were only found in Africa, underline Africa only. And then we said oldest fossils of the Homo habilis and the Homo erectus, those were also found only where? In Africa, whereas their youngest were found outside of what? Of Africa. So let's see how the 6 marks were allocated. Yes, fossils of Ardipithecus, found Africa only. Fossils of Australopithecus, found Africa only. Homo habilis, Homo erectus, oldest fossils of this found where? In Africa. And then the oldest fossils also of the Homo sapiens were found in Africa, while the younger ones were found out of Africa. So we have oldest Homo erectus, oldest Homo sapiens, those were found in Africa. And then again, what I want to bring your attention to is that, remember, if you answer this question and you just say fossils of Ardipithecus were found in Africa and you stop there, you don't get the mark, because the key here is this word only. Only. Australopithecus, Ardipithecus, habilis, only in Africa. And then erectus and Homo sapiens, these were the oldest, only, not only, but they were oldest that were found in Africa. let me just go back. Okay, no, we'll go forward, it's fine. The diagram below then represents one model of the human evolution, or of the evolution of some of the hominids. So here it's identify the type of the diagram that is shown below. We've already shown the answer, you've done this earlier. This is the phylogenetic tree or the cladogram. How many genera are represented by the diagram? Remember the genera, we spoke about them earlier. Homo is a genera, so we have all these belong to one genera, which is Homo, but then we also have this genera at the bottom, which is called the Australopithecus. So it means that the genera that are shown in this diagram, they are 2. So there's only 2. Name the species that is represented by X on the diagram, and here the X on the diagram uses stone tools. If you remember, Homo habilis, handyman. So I think the answer there is Homo habilis. Let's look at the answer. Yes, it is Homo habilis. Then name the species that shares a common ancestor with the Homo erectus. So we have Homo erectus over here. And here is the common ancestor at the bottom where it branches into 2. So the other species from this branch is the Homo naledi. So Homo naledi is the one that shares a common ancestor with the Homo erectus. And then on the very same question again, which species of the genus Homo is the only one in existence today? We said out of all these Homo species that we spoke about, the only ones that are still in existence today is the Homo sapiens. Then the other question is, name 2 forms of evidence that would have been used to support the information in the diagram. Remember, we only looked at the we have fossil evidence, cultural evidence, and genetic evidence. So these are the types of evidence that supports what? Evolution. Then going on to the next question here, the average cranial capacity of Homo sapiens is 1,500 centimeter cubed compared to the 520 centimeter cubed in Australopithecus africanus. The significance of explain the significance of the difference in cranial capacity. Vediga explained earlier, when you answer questions on explain, and remember you are guided by the what? By the 3 marks. So you cannot just write one sentence and expect to gain 3 marks. So here we are told about the capacity that is 1,500 compared to 520. What is the significance of the difference in the capacity? So here we have, so Homo sapiens have a larger cranial capacity, which indicates larger brain, leading to what? Greater intelligence. So what are you looking at here? We're looking at the cause and the what and the effect. So Homo sapiens have a larger cranial capacity, indicates a larger brain. And what is the effect of this cause is that it leads to what? To greater intelligence. That is then the 3 marks. So we have the cause and the effect. Cause being the larger brain capacity or the larger brain, and the effect being the greater intelligence. So this is how you answer all your explain questions. There must be a cause and the effect in your explanation. Then the last one, explain how the fossils of Australopithecus africanus species X, and which is this, and Homo erectus, which is the one there, are used to support out of Africa hypothesis. So what did we say earlier? We said the oldest of the Homo erectus, were found in Africa, and then we said only of the Homo habilis, because this is H habilis, and it. So we said the only fossils of the Homo habilis were found only in Africa. So remember that. When you look into out of Africa hypothesis, we said Australopithecus, Ardipithecus, and Homo habilis, these 3, their fossils were only found where? In Africa. And then we said the oldest of the Homo erectus and the oldest of the Homo sapiens were found in Africa. But remember here the question only asked about Homo habilis and Homo erectus. So your answer will be the only fossils of the Homo habilis were found in Africa, and the oldest fossils of the Homo erectus were found in Africa. So again, or in Australopithecus. So Australopithecus fossils, Africa only, Homo habilis, Africa only, oldest of Homo erectus and oldest of Homo sapiens were found in Africa. I think we have come then to the end of today's session. So I just want to correct again on the out of Africa hypothesis, that remember it's the three that were only found in Africa: Australopithecus, Ardipithecus, and Homo habilis. Those that were only found in Africa. And then the oldest, it is the Homo erectus and the Homo sapiens. So we have come to the end of today's sessions, grade 12 learners. Most of you, I know you are done with the syllabus in your schools already. You are already busy with revision. Remember what your teachers tell you, and what we are going to tell you here is that you revise. You do as many past exam question papers as you can. It is the only way you are going to remember this at the end of the year. So wishing you good luck for your papers that are coming on the 15th and on the 17th of September. Thank you.